Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to have a chat about the books that I read and reviewed in September 2022. We'll start off by discussing fiction because that's what I've typically been doing in these wrap-up videos, but also because my fiction reading during September was a whole lot leaner than my nonfiction reading. So before we get into talking about the nonfiction books, I thought we would quickly go through all the novels that I read, and the first one that I want to talk about, it's one that I had sky-high expectations for. It's The Lunar Housewife by Caroline Woods. This is a work of historical fiction set in 1950s New York City. We follow a writer, her name is Louise, and she writes under a pseudonym for a literary magazine. She's dating one of the co-owners of this literary magazine. And then on the side, we also find out that she's writing a science fiction novel about an American woman falling in love with a Soviet man on the moon, and we get snippets from that novel. Louise seems to have a pretty good life, but she can't seem to shake the suspicion that her boyfriend is secretly working for the CIA. This book was such a letdown. As I was reading it, I kept holding on to hope that the plot would go somewhere interesting, but instead we just kept getting bogged down by this absolutely toxic relationship between Louise and her boyfriend. They would just have the same fight over and over and over again. It felt like being invited into someone's horrific relationship, so it was very uncomfortable. And then we never got any real answers, so it's also wildly unsatisfying. And while I understood what Caroline Woods was trying to do with the novel within the novel that Louise is writing, the sci-fi novel, I get that it was supposed to be some sort of statement about perceptions of reality and hidden lives during the Cold War era. It's just that I didn't like it. The night I was working so hard to just power through the end of this book, I was sitting in our living room across from my husband who was playing video games at the time, and at one point he looked up and asked me, "Are you okay?" Because I'm pretty sure I looked like my soul had left my body. I was so ready for this book to be over. I just wanted to power through. I wanted to finish it because I wanted to see if it came to a good conclusion. It didn't, so then I was very upset after that. I can say that the only redeeming quality that this book had in my eyes was, surprisingly enough, Ernest Hemingway as a character. I thought he was actually really well done as a character. But then again, I don't even really like Hemingway, so it was a small victory. No joke, after I finished The Lunar Housewife, I had a brief moment, an existential crisis, if you will, where I legitimately had the thought, do I even like fiction? Will there ever be a fiction book that speaks to me like some of my favorite fiction books? Because there have been some very bad apples this year, let me tell you. But thankfully, the next book I'm about to talk about came along and made me believe again. It's called Revelations by Mary Sherratt. I originally put this book on my September TBR because I was really craving a Matrix by Lauren Groff read-alike. And this one absolutely delivered that, and then some. This is historical fiction about real-life historical figure Marjorie Kemp, who was a 15th century English female mystic. We start following her in her teenage years in the book. We see her get married and struggle under the weight of domestic duties. But then when she starts having children, she begins getting divine visions. And then later on in her life, what was once this garden variety version of wanderlust that she always had, it morphs into this real ambition to make a religious pilgrimage. For as tough as this book could be to read at times because of how awful some of the other characters could be to Marjorie, and it's really hard to see that because you grow to care for Marjorie so much throughout this book, despite that, I really enjoyed this reading experience. It definitely scratched that itch for a Matrix read-alike, so I absolutely recommend it if you ever find yourself with such a craving. I think this book would satisfy that. But more than anything, I really liked spending time with Marjorie. She is so determined. She's so brave. She knows what she wants. She's not afraid to go out and get it. I loved hearing about her story. And I think the author beautifully weaved in a lot of her actual history into this novel while taking some necessary liberties to keep the plot humming along nicely. For me, this was a solid 4-star read, and I think I enjoyed it even more because it proved to me that yes, there are novels out there that I can actually like. I also did a quick reread of Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll because I knew that the movie adaptation was coming out in early October. This book is a psychological thriller about a young woman living in New York City. She has this seemingly perfect life, but she actually has a lot of darkness hidden away in her past. I read this book for the first time back in 2016, and as I was doing the second read through, I was very surprised to find that my reaction to the book, and especially to the main character, was surprisingly similar to my first read through. I compared this novel to that new movie adaptation in my latest book versus movie video that I did, and in that new video, I included a clip of me back in 2016 talking about this book when I read it for the first time in one of my wrap-up videos. Yes, I have been on BookTube that long. So if you want to hear my thoughts on this novel, on the new movie, or if you just want to take a glimpse into my past, I will put a link to the new book versus movie video in my description box below and up in the cards. Another novel that will take you back in time, only this one will take you back to the 1990s, is a book that I reviewed for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's the new book from the one, the only Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's called Carrie Soto is Back. As you may recall, in August, I read Malibu Rising, partially in order to prepare myself to review this book, because these two books are in the same universe, and also because in Malibu Rising, we get to meet tennis superstar Carrie Soto for the very first time. Carrie Soto is a dagger-tongued, retired tennis champion who is compelled to come back into the tennis world after one of her records that she set during her heyday is tied by an up-and-coming player. The very competitive Carrie Soto does not like that one bit, so she decides to come back to tennis in order to defend her title, but it's a whole lot harder because she's not in the shape that she once was. I really enjoyed this book. If you would like to hear my full thoughts on it, I'll pop a link to my review in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette down in the description box below. Then the other written review of mine that appeared during the month of September is one that I wrote for a new venue, Words Without Borders. I reviewed War in Me by Falia Hassan, which is a gorgeous yet devastating translated memoir of an Iraqi woman whose life story is unfortunately far too full of the horrors of war. This book broke my heart and then put it back together again. It's one of the most powerful books I have read all year. If you would like to hear more about it, I'll link my review in the description box below. And also, the next nonfiction book I would like to talk about is another highly powerful and moving memoir. I finally read Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a book that people have been urging me to read ever since it was first published. The author of this book was the victim in a highly publicized case. She was assaulted by Brock Turner after a college party. He was found guilty for this crime, but then received a very light sentence that did not match the seriousness of the crime. The case made national headlines, partially because of Chanel Miller's victim impact statement that she wrote under the name Emily Doe. It went viral online. Well, in this memoir, she comes forward as the survivor, and she talks about the entire experience, everything leading up to that night, what she remembers from the night, and then especially the aftermath, everything from the day after, talking to police, and then the later media attention that she and the case got, the stresses of the trial, and then all of the online scrutiny that she had to deal with. It seems that in many ways, the aftermath of the assault was an additional trauma on top of what she already went through. I don't know what more I can say about this memoir that hasn't already been said. It's just that now I can see why everyone speaks about this book in the way that they do. I can see why people say how affected they are by this book because I had the same experience now. First and foremost, it's just a beautifully written memoir. I would be simultaneously admiring the way that she put something because she just had such a perfect way of putting certain emotions into words. And then not even a second later, the true weight, the true meaning of those words would really sink in, and it just absolutely shattered my heart. I will admit to thinking that it got a little bit long at points. Not everywhere, just a few different points I noticed that it was going on a little long, but but I can't imagine any editor out there would have wanted to alter her manuscript all that much. And if I'm being completely honest, if I were her editor, I couldn't have brought myself to do it because so much of this book is just brilliant and she's just pouring her heart out. But I think if those few sections had been just a touch shorter, and I'm talking a 25-page reduction overall, I think this would have been the perfect book in my eyes. But then the rest of my nonfiction reading during September, I realized after the fact, fit a bit of a theme. I read 4 books that all added up to be a very sensory experience. My reading explored sounds, scents, and taste in particular. For the sound aspect, I read This Is What It Sounds Like, What the Music You Love Says About You by Susan Rogers and Augie August. In this book, the two authors dissect different elements of music and show you how your own preferences within each of those elements all add up to create your own unique listener profile. I have been talking about this book for what feels like an entire month straight, so it's likely that you've heard me mention this book somewhere on some different social media platform, but in case you haven't, I loved this book. So informative, so much fun. I actually reviewed it here on my channel. In case you missed that review, I will link it for you in the description box below and up in the cards. Then moving on to scent, I read The Emperor of Scent by Chandler Burr, which is a nonfiction book that discusses a controversial olfactory theory proposed by biophysicist Luca Turin. His theory suggests that the smells that we pick up on as humans aren't determined by the shapes of the molecules making up that scent, as the established theory suggests, but instead, the scent that we smell is based on the vibration of those molecules. That was the very simple explanation, according to my understanding. The book contains a less simple one, I'll just say that. And although I can get very geeky about science, I'm very excitable when something interests me, this book got to be very heavy and overwhelming at times. There would be moments when I would be totally enraptured by this book, particularly when the author would be describing specific scents. My God, is he skilled at doing that, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise because he was the perfume critic for the New York Times for a while there. But then at other times, it just all got to be way too much. I would have trouble understanding the science because the author does not do a good job of trying to translate this very complex science into something understandable for non-science experts like myself. And then other times the author would just get too wordy and I could feel my attention drifting elsewhere even as I was trying really hard to focus. Ironically enough, this book kind of felt like walking into a department store's perfume section. At first, it's really intriguing, smelling all these different scents. You feel there's just this symphony of scent going on around you, but very quickly, that symphony of scent turns into a cymbal clash inside of your nasal cavity, and you find yourself with a headache. Yeah, I felt this book like right here. But then my final nonfiction books of September both explored our sense of taste, because I read and reviewed 2 books on apples. The Ghost Orchard by Helen Humphreys, which is a beautiful exploration of history and loss, using forgotten apples and apple orchards as guides. And Apples by Frank Browning, which is a Mary Roach-esque style of microhistory, in which the author tells all different types of stories and goes on different adventures, all revolving around the fruit. Everything from its roots in the mountains of Kazakhstan to the reasons why you can find specific apple varieties in your local grocery store and not others. I adored both of these books on apples. I like them for different reasons, but I actually think they made a really good pair as well. And since I enjoyed them so much, it led me to make probably my most enjoyable, my most joyful 2 books on video to date. My 2 books on videos are videos in which I review 2 books on one subject. In this case, it was 2 books on apples. In case you missed that video, if you would like to hear more about one or even both of these books, I will link that video for you in the description box below and up in the cards. So those were the books of September. A varied bunch, but I enjoyed a lot of them, and for that I am very grateful. If you have thoughts on any of these books, if you've read them before, you want to share your opinions with me, or if you now want to read any of these books after hearing me discuss them, I would love to chat about that with you in the comment section below. All the books that I mentioned today, as well as any other links I promised you, will be down in the description box below for you, and at the bottom of that exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internet, including Goodreads and Instagram, the two places where I'm the most active, in case you would like to keep up with what I am reading and writing about right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.